Hi there, dear mommies. This is Sherry Hayes with momdelights.com, and I'm coming to you from outside in my yard today. It's so beautiful. It's one of those last September days of the year, and it's lovely. And I want to talk to you about something today that will add to your life. So hope you can find something to do while I'm talking, because that's all I'll be doing. And just listen as we dive into the good life in Jesus. So today I want to talk about socialization, but not really. So I want to talk about how we're perceived by the public and how we can make that a very positive thing. So I'm going to take you on a little journey. At the beginning, we're going to go over some stuff that I've probably talked about before on this channel, but I think maybe there's some new information and maybe you might just enjoy it. But stick to the end and we'll get down to the nitty-gritty and give some really practical ideas. Okay, so first I'm going to talk about how homeschool kids don't need to be socialized, but they do need to be civilized. Now, socialization, in my opinion, is a crock. It is the overemphasis of the natural tendency of humankind to flock together. It's natural. We like to flock together. We are what they call social beings. Now, this flocking can be good when it is led by God, such as in the New Testament church. Remember, they had all things in common. Now, that wasn't forced. That was voluntary, by the way. But usually this ends up very badly. Just thinking here of the Tower of Babel. This was socialization and cooperation, something that has been foisted on us for many decades, at its pinnacle. Just think what a bunch of people, united and supportive of each other in a common goal, tried to do. They actually thought they could reach heaven and overcome God, right? And lots of things that are happening today that are so egregious and we can't stand are because people are supportive and cooperative of each other in evil. To be clear, let's explore what being social really means. Now, according to Collins, which I've paraphrased slightly, it means adjusting to or making oneself fit for cooperative group living. Now, on the outside, this seems just splendid. No one enjoys the chaotic jangling of discord. James 3:16 says this, "For where envy and self-seeking exist, confusion and every evil thing are there." Nobody likes confusion and nobody likes to feel they're in the midst of evil. You know what I'm talking about. Chaos. We all prefer peace, but just what kind of peace is the question. I'm afraid conflict is so distasteful to us that we often settle for pseudo-peace. We incorrectly believe that peace is a lack of conflict with others. And it is, but it is so much more. Peace is not only a lack of conflict with other people, it is actually a state of agreement with God that brings with it prosperity in every other area of life. That is actually the meaning of shalom in the Old Testament. Consider this other scripture in James 3:17. "But the wisdom that is from above is first pure, then peaceable, gentle, willing to yield, full of mercy and good fruits, without partiality and without hypocrisy." Now the fruit, and this is verse 18. "Now the fruit of righteousness is sown in peace by those who make peace." Interesting that, isn't it? Okay. Then we have also Psalm 34, 11 through 18. Let me read that to you. "Come, you children, listen to me. I will teach you the fear of the Lord. Who is the man who desires life and who loves many days that he may see good? Keep your tongue from evil and your lips from speaking deceit. Depart from evil and do good. Seek peace and pursue it." There's that word peace. "The eyes of the Lord are on the righteous, and his ears are open to their cry. The face of the Lord is against those who do evil, to cut off the remembrance of them from the earth. The righteous cry out, and the Lord hears, and delivers them out of all their troubles. The Lord is near to those who have a broken heart, and saves such as have a contrite spirit." Now, there's even more in, I love that song. But anyway, so if we have, as we have read this, we notice that we are told to seek peace and pursue it. That's important. Also notice this call to action is spoken amidst instruction in the fear of the Lord, and how the Lord rejects those who do evil but quickly rushes to the aid of the righteous. Socialization is not even in the same ballpark of this idea. As we already noted, socializing people does not have to have a moral end. It could very well lead to an evil end, even a destructive end, which it mostly does. Consider the Nazi Party in Germany. Certain the people were being socialized. They were conditioned to behave as members of a proud group, the Third Reich, and anyone who dissented from the aims of this group was summarily silenced. This did not decrease sinful man's tendency towards strife and envy, like in James 3:16, but it served to increase these ugly sinful attitudes, because it's the same as with communism. Whenever you have these types of groups that are formulated and they're not according to God's ideas, they tend to increase people's envy and their strife towards each other. People rat on each other. They become happy when someone goes to the gulag and their family was the proud, true communist or true socialist or whatever have you. Okay. And now I heard lots of these stories firsthand from people who escaped from behind the Iron Curtain when I was in the Army in the 80s. We were taught by people who had escaped, and they told us what it was really like to live under that kind of a regime. And unfortunately, we're seeing some of those behaviors now in America. Here's a truth. Any group conceived outside of the fear and intentions of God's will increase human misery and eventually self-destruct. Okay, so why would we ever want to socialize our children? This is what our system of education coupled with the media is attempting to do to us all. As John Taylor Gatto has put it, they are trying to make us all fit for a herd, a hive, or an anthill. Instead of feeling stressed that your children might not be fitting in as homeschoolers, maybe you should feel really glad. You just say, whoa, our kids don't fit into that mess. But before your arm gets sore from patting yourself on the back, let's look at the higher thing, or the higher things we should be leading our children to, okay? Number one, the two most important commandments, with Jesus said in Mark 12:30-31, love the Lord your God with all your heart, your mind, your soul, your strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. And also the golden rule. Now, how is this different from social, like cooperative, like getting along with a group? How is this different? Because putting God first means sometimes we must be at odds with other people, right? This means others might not consider us socialized because we're not agreeing with the goal of the group. Also, loving others looks different. It means sometimes we have to speak uncomfortable truth that also puts us at odds with others, okay? And this keeps us from being considered cooperative members of the group. Just think about, I'm thinking here about in Babylon, Daniel and his three companions, we call them Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They actually had Hebrew names, but those were their Babylonian names. They were cooperative with the group to a certain extent, and they were civilized. I'm going to get more into this in a little bit. They actually bloomed where they were planted. They were a blessing to that society, the Babylonian hedonistic, society that they were in. They were a blessing to that society, but they were willing to stand for God and his principles first, which put them at odds with that group. So they were thrown into the fiery furnace, and Daniel was thrown into the lion's den. People didn't like him, you see, because even though they cooperated in many ways, and they were civil, and they were kind, and they were good people, they always blessed others, they were at odds, and so they were not considered socialized according to that group. Practicing the golden rule even puts us on the outside. Okay, it might cause conflict to disagree with someone who wants to murder helpless, tiny people, and I believe you know what I'm referring to here. But I would hope someone would defend me if I were helpless, right? So that's the golden rule. Having said all this, let's look closely at something often said about homeschooled children. They're weird. Okay, so here's a story. My son, our oldest son, was one of the 20% that did 80% of the work in this church. And he had another friend of his who was also one of the only one of the workers in the church. You know, there's always that group. And they were sitting around, they were discussing some church business, and there was a principal of a junior high that was talking about how they had to allow homeschoolers to play competitively in the basketball program they had there. And he said, you know, homeschoolers are always weird, aren't they? And he didn't realize that our son and his friend were both homeschool graduates. And so they just kind of looked at each other, you know, sideways. Here they were, the 20% that did 80% of the work in the church, and he thought homeschoolers were weird and they were homeschooled. We thought that was kind of interesting. But sometimes it's absolutely wonderful. Okay, now sometimes it's absolutely wonderful that homeschooled children are weird according to society standards. But sometimes it's not only weird, but rude. You know, homeschoolers can be rude and honestly strange, and it doesn't reflect well on homeschooling. Now, I know we like to go on and on about how homeschoolers are not isolated, that they have plenty of opportunities to be socialized, and I suppose that allays the fears of some outsiders. But what the heart of the question begs is, are children civil? Do they know how to greet or respond to other people? Do they know how to be warm and welcoming without being indiscreet? You know, sometimes, you know, telling all the stuff. These are things that cause outsiders to pause and consider. I'll tell you one instance. We took our children to a specialty, like a boutique store in an older part of town. And it was run by some people that we knew, and we took our children there, and the owner was asking one of our children some questions, and instead of answering this person was like 12 or 13, she just went to a different part of the store and hid. Talk about embarrassment. All right, and so this person was going, boy, homeschoolers are weird, you know. And so I don't know how she missed the idea that she was supposed to be warm and welcoming, but anyway, there was a talk afterwards. Thankfully, teaching children how to interact with others kindly and politely is pretty easy to do. So it doesn't take a whole curriculum. You don't have to worry about it day and night. But there's just certain things that get missed. If your kids are used to being at home and used to being around each other, like mine are, sometimes we miss teaching them certain things that are obvious to other people that have to interact all the time. But it's not a big deal. It doesn't take a whole bunch of time. It doesn't have to worry. You can do it pretty easily. Now here's some ideas of how to go about this. Okay. Number one, okay. Number one, read aloud old books which showcase polite behavior, like older books. Like if you watch the old the Jane Austen movies and stuff like that, it just kind of puts an idea of civility that we don't really practice that much in this age in their minds. Number two, find and share current books on manners. Like we checked a whole bunch out from the library, and we would read them, and we would go over them, and we would talk about them together. Number three, read through George Washington's Rules of Civility and discuss that. That's amazing. He's got a whole bunch of stuff that makes you really think even about yourself. You can role play various social situations and give children practice. Role playing really helps. If you can, like you say, now, you know, always be polite and always do this, but you have to kind of show them so you can role play. Say, what if we were in a store and a lady comes up to you and or something like that, and or if what if someone comes to the door, or we welcome someone to the house, how do you treat them? Or what if we go to someone else's house, and you kind of role play that, and they kind of get it in their mind that what's acceptable behavior. Okay. Help your child formulate answers for innocent questions. Now this is like it goes back to that time when our daughter just kind of hid because I think this lady asked her what grade she was in and she had no idea. Okay, because we don't go by grade levels, but it's kind of a good idea just to help your kid kind of assign a grade level to them so that when someone talks to them, this person they don't know anything about homeschooling. They don't know that you don't go by grades. They don't know what that means. You don't have to spend 3 hours discussing and explaining. Just, you know, well, you're 9, so you're probably in 4th grade. Just tell me you're in the 4th grade. It just is just so much easier. Or you could say, well, actually, we like to be, we don't do grades, or something. Sometimes I'll say, well, we actually don't practice the habit of putting children at the same level as the grade level because every child's different. I'll say something like that, but our kids usually can't remember that, so we'll just give them a grade level. Okay. And here's some other questions. How old are you? Sometimes at home, you know, we don't talk about that a lot. Or where do you live? they just say, well, do you live in the town? Do you live somewhere? Are you, you know what I'm saying? Maybe you're out of town. I don't know. Maybe you're on a vacation. Where do you live? What if your child thinks, I know it's happened. They just go blank because, they're not used to those questions. But you can kind of coach them a little bit. Okay, have them write their entire name. Practice that. We had a son. His name was Timothy. And at the time that he was very young, we were watching Home Improvement with Tim Allen, Tim the Toolman Taylor. And he knew his name began with T, and he saw the word tool in Tim the Toolman Taylor. So he decided that his name, when he knew his name was Tim, but when he wrote his name as Tool. Anyway, stuff. Okay, so teach them write their entire name, as well as memorizing at least you and your husband's full names and phone numbers, because I always wonder, like, if they were ever out on their own, they'd have to be able, we're the only contact they have, so they'd have to know our name, our full names, and our phone numbers. That's just safety, right? Now, these are very simple and straightforward kind of ideas, right? They're not huge, they're not amazingly hard to do. But sometimes we just skip it because we get so busy with making sure that they know their times tables and long division and how to spell correctly. And we forget that these little tiny things are important too, okay? So I know they seem obvious, but I have missed them before. But they will give you and your kids the extra boost as you attempt to be salt and light in the earth as a homeschool family. So I hope this has blessed you today. Hope you have a wonderful day with your kids, and please like and subscribe and click all the bells. Bye-bye.